So on March 18th, the Congress passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA. And I think most of us have at least heard about it. Jill, can you walk us through, at least at a high level, what the primary components of the act are and where there may be some tipping points for employers considering what to do about it and what to do with their people?
Sure. So let me just say first that I'm not an attorney and I'm not going to take a interpretive approach in this act. That said, I want to just give an overview of the act, and then as we go through this presentation, hopefully I'll provide some real practical nuggets to support those on the call in terms of how do I actually apply this within my own situation. So the act is in place to support employees that are affected either by being sick themselves or needing to take care of family members, children, in times where schools are closed or childcare is not available. And so there's various scenarios that require additional level of financial support when people go either out on paid sick leave or for what is known now as the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. So these are extensions of what we had before in terms of paid family leave and FMLA. The FMLA, emergency FMLA, is now accessible to companies that are under 500 employees, where that was limited before in a much narrower category. So going back to the previous slide, the emergency paid sick leave is, and both are applicable to organizations with less than 500 employees. And that includes all U.S. employees that are either full-time, part-time, seasonal, or temporary, and does not include independent contractors. There are exceptions to employers being able to support employees in this way with organizations under 50 employees, and those you have to apply for those exceptions, and we are still waiting on guidelines on what that looks like. But there is opportunity for organizations to apply those exceptions. So the effective date has changed. It was April 2nd, it's now April 1st. And so you count those number of employees based on that effective date. As you can see here, there are various scenarios here that reasons why employees would not be able to work and then be eligible for 80 hours of paid sick leave. Okay, moving to the next slide. So the emergency FMLA is up to 12 weeks, 10 of those paid, 2 of those unpaid. And you can see additional details here around the payment for those 10 weeks versus the 2 weeks that are unpaid. So there's a lot of nuances and details here that I'm not going to go into right now, but also know that there are tax credits available to relieve the employer for being able to implement these kind of support, because the employer obviously has to pay for these the time that employees are on leave. And I'm going to let Andre talk a little bit about the tax credits that are available in these type scenarios.
Thanks, Jill. So as Jill was just mentioning, we're looking to how the government is going to actually implement or offset some of the costs of paid sick leave or people taking family leave. And it's really, the opportunity is to utilize these payments and calculate tax credits that go against your payroll taxes. So there's there's a couple stipulations surrounding some maximums of how much you can actually take of a credit around both the paid sick leave for individuals who are staying home and self-quarantining, or they themselves are sick. There's a maximum of $511 per day for up to 10 days per individual, and also a $200 per day for 10 days maximum credit for people who are taking care of others. So if your kids are staying home because their school is closed and you are not able to go to work because you're taking care of those kids, there's a $200 per day allotment maximum for generating a credit. So just very briefly, we want to talk a little bit more about how the rubber meets the road, or how to utilize these credits. So as you're paying for people on paid sick leave or family leave, those are going to be outflows. The opportunity is to calculate how much of the outflow is eligible for a credit using those maximums. And then you're able to restrict the remittance of payment to payroll taxes as in a concurrent type of setting. If you are not able to stop remittance, or if it's too challenging or difficult, or it's going to be disruptive for your company, you can have the opportunity to reconcile those payments on your quarterly payroll tax returns. I'm going to stop there just for a bit, just because I want to share some time with our other partners on the panel. But in a sense, we're happy to kind of talk through some of these nuances and how to monetize the tax savings as a result of these accidents.
Jill, Andre, let me ask an unplanned question. What might be the implications of private equity ownership or a franchise operation in terms of qualifying? Do we know anything at this point? Has anything come out in the literature?
Qualifying for
the ability to take advantage of these.
Yeah, so I am not aware of any limitations in terms of type of entities, whether nonprofit, for-profit, private equity. I'm not aware of any limitations. Andre, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I guess the real big limitation there is organizations with 500 or fewer employees. That's the real big bar that we have to take a look at, and understanding how does that define. Jill touched on it earlier, but that's the big limiting factor when we look to these tax credits.
So I want to get to a couple of real-time questions we've had. They're pretty thematic, so I think we can cover many of them in one question. I'll give you a two-parter, Jill. One is the interaction of the effective date of the FFCRA and some of the self-quarantining activities that began prior to that. Is that just carved out, or is there any consideration for loss or lost productivity prior to the effective date?
No, the effective date is the effective date. And so if people have gone out on leave prior to that effective date, it does not get applied. And it's an interesting point, because in terms of calculating time, you may, in the payroll tax credits, it's really based on the first. And if you're looking at a pay period that carries through, you're still looking at that effective date as of April 1. So the effective date is a firm date from all applications.
And Andre, a question about headcount. So we've talked about there being some sort of motion around the under 50 employee impact from FFCRA. For the tax credits, is there a similar threshold, or does everyone under 500 employees qualify for the credits?
Yeah, there's no delineation for the tax credits for under 50. I think that there are some provisions that Jill might be able to speak to in terms of some organizations under 50 people are exempt from some of these other acts. So it's not restrictive for under 50.
Yeah, I mean, there is the exception for organizations under 50 employees in terms of having to implement and support their organizations by providing these leaves. But as I said earlier, the guidelines aren't 100% clear yet. I think there's some still working through the system in terms of understanding how those exceptions are going to be applied for. But it definitely is going to be based on an organization's ability to pay and viability to carry through on supporting their employees in this way.
Got it.